Hello and welcome back to the Undercut podcast. It's time to review the eighth race of the year, the Austrian Grand Prix. Almost caught me out there.
Nearly.
I was so close. I'm your host, Jesse Billington, and joining me once again is none other than Mr. Thiemo Albers Daly. How are you?
Not bad. Not bad. We had an interesting Grand Prix, kind of a reverse mullet in a lot of ways. A lot of fun at the front, and then more business as usual at the back. So, it had enjoyable elements. Probably one of the better Austrian Grand Prix we've had in recent years. That's what I'll definitely say.
Hmm. The Enthusiasts Grand Prix. There were some interesting bits to pick apart from it, I think, if you want to get particularly anal about things.
It was a bit of something for everyone, I think. If you wanted what you suggested, that's the back half, maybe. If you wanted a bit of what you were hoping for and what we've seen in earlier points of the season, Australia being one of the examples, and China as well, then the first half is more for you. So I mean, it catered.
Yeah. But we'll get to that in a second. But there is importantly some news to touch on. And this is something that I can't remember if this happened before the Austrian Grand Prix and we forgot to mention it, or vice versa. But
Mhm.
this is essentially Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the president of the FIA, abolishing term limits. So previously you've only been able to do, was it 2 terms as the
Tutor.
FIA president? And he has abolished that rule, thus essentially allowing himself to rule indefinitely.
Yeah, which I feel like we should mention, even if it is a bit late to the party, because the Grand Prix at the moment, they come thick and fast, and you forget what happens when, and then things fall through the cracks. But this is something that shouldn't really fall through the cracks, because I was having this conversation earlier. You know, broadly speaking, good people don't abolish rules like that because they don't see the need to, because what's wrong with having a free and fair election for an organization of that size? And it was one thing not having any candidates running against you in the last quote unquote election. Is there's still some debate of whether you can call it an election if it's just one person running and you can only vote for them. So then to go on to the next step of the path, which looks a bit all too familiar, of just yeah, let's just be away with all of the permanents and let's just see how long it can go on for. Which, given that he's not spring chicken, but he's not ancient either, is quite a while. Which, yeah, I know that you can argue in favor of some of the things he's done. I'm not saying he's not done some good things, but it doesn't strike me as something that, again, if you were doing really good things for the sport, that you would then back that up with, you know, what you should do is keep me in forever. It goes against the nature of what you've been doing action wise, so it's a bit counterintuitive, but no one seems to be making as much of a fuss about it as I feel like there should be. I don't think I've seen any broad coverage them touch on it even for like 30 seconds, which is telling in a lot of ways in terms of what can be approached and what can't be in certain circumstances, which luckily we don't have that limitation just yet.
Hmm.
We'll just get pulled off immediately.
Yes, yeah. If this podcast suddenly cuts off, you'll know that he's
This
found
is the
us.
thing that gets us.
Yeah, then finally the thing that gets us. Um, yeah, I think I know the BBC's touched on it with their F1 coverage, but I think that Andrew Benson was very deft in his touch around this and very clever in how he reported on it. But yeah, there's on the one hand, he's steering the FIA in a relatively sensible manner at the moment, and therefore I don't think it's worth being too fussed over. However,
That is a dangerous slope to start standing at the top of.
yes, yeah, that's very much the case. And it's sort of almost the opposite of there's a very good phrase, a leader who does not want the crown is the one who deserves it the most. We're very much looking at the opposite to that and does bring into question someone's sort of morals, urges, desires, and ambitions in leadership, premiership of that nature, especially one when there is an election that is supposed to back it up and sort of a choice between sort of a variety of parties that should suggest otherwise. And we look at sort of, say, elections in Russian politics and how open they are. And then the fact that in America there is sort of rumor that Trump might be considering the idea of abolishing term limits, and we look at his outstanding character record, where recently he had to re-undergo trial surrounding rape allegations and has now been reconfirmed as a rapist. This is the sort of character that often looks at abolishing the idea of term limits. So
Goes as well with the point you mentioned there of um, do might be doing some positive things, but it's the sense that we don't know fully the plans that he has underway for everything. Whereas, interestingly, this weekend of all the weekends, Bernie Ecclestone was there at the Grand Prix, giving out the very tacky medal that the drivers now get. Found it hilarious that one of the shortest people in existence gives the medal to one of the tallest people on the grid on a podium for that to add extra insult. And it goes back to that old debate of how bad was Bernie, and you go, fundamentally, you wouldn't have the sport as it is today. You wouldn't have the sport full stop without him. And I'm not going to pretend that he's all sunshine and rainbows because there's a lot of shady stuff in his background. But it's the devil you know, and you at least always knew that if you were going to get screwed over, he would do it to your face. He would, you were never under any illusions of where he stood on anything. He would word things very carefully so that maybe you could misconstrue it, but he never really misled in that sense. Whereas this time we don't see that much of him. We don't, we kind of have to take his word for a lot of things, it feels like, and it just gets into that murky territory, like you said, you're just waiting for the shoe to drop, and that's very hard to then actively debate against. Not that we're able to, because how do we do that when you can't run against him?
yeah,
I suggest that like we're running for it, but you know what I mean.
it's one of those very awkward things of also the fact that he's been a lot less prominent in Formula One this season, I think. That potentially, I don't know whether it's just the broadcast or whether it's sort of like personal action from him, but he doesn't seem to have been sort of front and center recently. And I think, if anything, that might have sort of helped sway his public perception around him as people have forgotten a
You
bit about
say
him.
that, I've still not forgotten the hair tussling with Kimmy back in Miami. So, when he does show up, it's not exactly great.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. Perhaps that's what the MB stands for in MB Salim. It's mixed bag Salim.
Mixed bag.
Um, but there
Try
we
and get
go.
that to catch on.
I'm sure we can have that on a t-shirt somewhere. Um,
Very niche reference that only certain people will get, but those
yeah,
people
maybe
will
like
appreciate it.
maybe 30 people worldwide will ever understand it. But anyway, before we are cancelled by Mohammed Ben Sulayem, we'll move into the Austrian Grand Prix. And obviously, this was a weekend that was declared a heat hazard, and it did throw up its own challenges. With I think Pirelli at one point said that the actual temperature of the track surface was getting up to, I think it was 62 degrees Celsius was one of the measurements they achieved with a probe in the tarmac. Air temperature was north of 35, and by and large, it was hot, which threw out some unique challenges for the drivers and teams. But overall, it was Mercedes who came out good. Russell taking pole in some unique circumstances and converting that into the win, with Kimi Antonelli qualifying fourth and finishing third.
It's always Jedi-like reflexes and foresight with his qualifying reactions, really, to time it to perfection. Because everybody was questioning how on earth did you manage that, and then you saw it and you go, I'm still not entirely sure how, but he somehow did, and he just kind of gets away with it. And it's that you say, I say, yeah, he gets away with it. There's nothing to get away with because he didn't do anything wrong, but it was just something we're not used to seeing from drivers outside of maybe Max and Lewis. So it's kind of refreshing to see other drivers are capable of that, even if it's just in like flashpoint moments. He needed this weekend though. Second win of the year, seventh career win. Um, First repeat venue, interestingly, for his race wins, Austria in 24 being the last time you won here. Um, this was definitely much more of a statement victory, it felt like, compared to Austria 24, because that was when I think Norris and Max were having their ding dong. And then he was just in the right place at the right time. And you have to be there, obviously. You've got to do a good job to get there. But he very much benefited from that. Whereas on this occasion, he just did not look in trouble at any point across the weekend, really. He was strong in practice, consistently up there, qualifying nails it, race nails it. And Antonelli, by comparison, looked like he was in a cartoon, definitely on the early stages of the race. The opening couple of laps, he was just all over the place. And I mean, really interesting. We talked maybe after Spain, maybe after Monaco, about how this European leg of the season last year was his kind of bogey moment. And so far, it's as much as it can be for a Mercedes driver, still being a bit of a bogey for him because he's there, but he's not the Kimi Antonelli of dominant form that we saw in the first part of the season. That's really interesting.
Yeah, the Mercedes situation is I don't really have a lot more to add. I think it's so easy to describe their race weekend. I think certainly with Russell, he had the foresight because he was a car behind Antonelli, and also just that slightly older head to be able to make that play in qualifying, knowing how much he needed to lift, how much he needs to be able to show that he lifted, and also knowing how much he was already up really helped. And the fact that he was already on an absolute god tier lap meant that when he saw that yellow, he was like, it's a single waved yellow. Well, for some reason, it wasn't a double wave or it wasn't a red. You could have easily sent those cars straight into the pits, given where the incident was. You could have just sent it straight to red. That's more of an FIA marshalling
And
stewarding
so,
thing.
in terms of a driver kind of reading situation, perfect because if it's
Yeah.
double yellow or red, fine, whatever. But you react to what's given to you, and then you let them argue about it later.
Yeah.
You're just doing
George's
your job.
George's reaction was functionally, from a driver's perspective,
Hmm.
perfect. I will, at this point, Max Verstappen did make reference to it when he crossed the line, obviously, or at some
Hmm.
point during it, they were like, and
Yeah,
double
when
wave.
Sainz retired,
Yeah, and he was like,
you're
"Oh,
saying,
sorry,
"Oh, do
no,
we
we're
slow
going
down for
flat
these?"
out then." Yeah, um, but yeah, I think Kimi struggled with the heat and maintaining tire condition early on. Bear in mind, he had a big fumble in was it Qatar last year as well, I think, which was a very hot race.
Hmm.
There's something about incredibly hot races that just seems to throw something at Kimi that he hasn't quite mastered yet. I'm not to say that he won't ever, but we're still seeing someone who's only in their second year in Formula One. So there is going to be still
It's
some
just
learning to
because of the
do.
domination we've had.
Yeah,
It's the five back-to-back wins, and then you drop off.
yeah, it
Not
sets such
completely.
a
I mean,
high
he was
bar.
still on. He was on for a podium in Spain and probably would have got near it. But it
Mm.
was just the fact that he never looked to be threatening the people at the top in Spain. He didn't look to be threatening at the top here either. It's just interesting how quickly that drop off is for a driver that was up there.
Mm. And I think again, it's the contrast thing, and the highs are high and the lows are low in Formula One, and it's so easy to sort of pick apart between them. But yeah, eventually sorted out his temperature, settled into his rhythm, fairly all right from Antonelli. But also Austria's start is very tricky because it's uphill, and it was a very slow back end to the field to come round. I know Lance Stroll took his sweet, sweet time coming around the field. I think he was barely coming through turn six when Russell was already parked up on the grid. So it would have been very tricky tire temperatures from the off and a very hard launch. This is something that Kimi will have only done a couple of times previously. We've already said that George is a multiple race win around this circuit now. It's somewhere he seems to go quite well, giving him the additional advantage. But then Kimi had asynchronous braking at points. He had brake temperatures different across the axle, probably due to the fact that wheels
Not a good
load up.
weekend for brakes.
No, the fact that probably the car loads up very differently through the bends, you end up with different heat temperatures in the tires, which are going to in turn sort of bake your brake pads as well. So it was very hard for him to find a consistent pedal feel. But overall, George flawless, Kimi still learning, Mercedes still the team to beat this season.
Definitely still the team to beat, but I like that it's not being straightforward as we feared it might be earlier on in the season. We saw Ferrari come into it. McLaren seem to be they kind of just poke with a stick. They don't really do much, but they're there enough to annoy everyone. And Max is Max, and I like that. It's not 2023. It's not 2014 either, where you see maybe a couple of other race wins from a Red Bull. I feel like we're going to get multiple races and maybe even multiple teams winning this year at some point, one way or the other. Whereas we've not had that in those 2 years in particular, which is nice because we don't want another immediate era of domination straight out of the box in any regulations. So,
It's good we're seeing this sort of jumble come into it from fairly early on. Next up, though, on the roster, still holding on to second place in the drivers and the constructors standing, sorry, is Ferrari. Hamilton qualified third and finished fifth, while Leclerc qualified second and finished eighth.
yeah, ambitious strategy for me, and I don't mean that in the sense of it was a left field strategy that they just thought, let's try it. It became a Hail Mary kind of ambition, and it didn't work ultimately for them. It backfired. But I say that as well because I think at the end of the day, they're still Ferrari. If this was Cadillac, and sorry to keep doing this to you, Cadillac, but when you've been here for 10 years, I'll be nicer to you. You're still in your first year, so I kind of have to. I sort of figure that, they're still learning their way around things. Ferrari are the oldest team on there, and you'd think that they would have maybe gamed out a few other ways of doing it. And maybe there wasn't another way for them to do it. Maybe they just really hemmed themselves in on this particular track, but it just seemed a bit out of character for them. They clearly have this one lap pace in qualifying, as we saw from them nearly getting a front row lockout. But then for not even one of them to still be on the podium by the end, and for Max in that Red Bull to pick both of them, it it just smacked of, yeah, you didn't get the strategy right here, and okay, yeah, you've got some factors specific to this circuit and the conditions that play into that, but you're still Ferrari and should have an arsenal of other tools and weaponry available to you to try and at least get one of your cars on the podium for that in that kind of a situation. Um, so it was a bit annoying for me on that front, especially when you look at the end. You saw the gap that Piastri had to Antonelli. He was miles away, and Lewis couldn't even get really close to him. The gap sort of it opened up a little bit, but maddening amount considering that McLaren has not really been competitive. It's been on the podium a couple of times, but that's more due to other teams having bad luck more than anything else. So for not even one of the throws to get there was really, yeah, it's kind of what I wasn't hoping we were going to get after Spain, but what I maybe expected after Spain, thinking, oh no, Ferrari, don't, and they did. Um, Silver lining though, Hamilton is now the only driver on the grid to have scored points in every sprint race and every Grand Prix so far this season. Gasly was the other one. He finished in 13th here. He's out of it now. Hamilton is the last one standing. Probably won't make him feel too much better, but he's on for Charles Leclerc 2024 style season of just mega consistency.
Hmm. I mean, from my perspective, it wasn't an ambitious strategy, Ferrari. It was the only strategy they could make work. And not even a Hail
That's where I
Mary.
have the
Yeah,
problem.
it was the only one they could make work because they set off and then realized just how bad tire degradation was. Obviously, a lot of feedback from the drivers in that opening sort of, I think it was a 16 lap stint they had where they went, no, these have just immediately fallen off a cliff. And obviously, the downforce setup wasn't quite there. I'll get into a bit more about why Charles probably didn't work either. But for Lewis, the odd pit stop under the safety car as well was a bit of clever thinking because it allowed him to get one of his stops in as cheaply as possible, essentially just allowing him to extend that middle sector a little bit. And the two hard stints wouldn't give him the distance needed. So cutting one short, running competitively on the soft to build back up that time post safety car where you've got the chance to bring those tyres in gently and just stretch out the soft a little bit longer than anticipated gave him the chance to do that sort of second hard stint that was a little bit longer. And equally, by that point, conditions had cooled around the circuit. It played into his hands a little bit more. It was still a long way to go on those tyres, but equally, it sort of kept him in things a little bit. I think equally, Lewis's engineer
It kept
knew,
him in things more than it kept Charles in,
yeah,
definitely. I
that's the
think it
thing.
was just the problem that, you have that advantage, like you say, with the VSC, which they almost missed, but then luckily got there. And even that, it just sort of was more damage limitation than actual giving you an advantage. It goes, well, you're not getting on the podium regardless because we fucked it. But you're not going to be down the bottom end of the top 10 like Charles is. So it's
Yeah,
really
that
a good thing.
damage limitations is entirely what it was. And again, I think Lewis survived it a lot better because he has that communication now with his engineer. They were able to talk them through it, and there was that really useful communication we saw sort of coming through at times on the international feed. But three stop just became a must for them because the heat and the setup was a tricky combination. Charles struggled, especially when you consider his brilliant pace over a lap, though. He looked set to have pole until Russell put in that absolute flyer. And I think that it's his setup that
And
then came
Hamilton before.
and Hamilton before him, really. But I think it was very much Charles' setup that came to the detriment of his tyres in the longer run. We saw the fact that that car over a lap uses its tyres really well. But when you've got, what, 70 odd laps to do around the Red Bull ring, you cannot have a car that's using its tyres like that, lap in, lap out. And that's quickly sort of paid out really quickly for him. He thought he was happy with the setups, well, having copied a rough idea from last year was one of the bits he mentioned in reports afterwards, which clearly also shows that the way that this year's chassis uses the rubber is so different in that it just didn't work.
Which is
All in,
another problem I've got there, thinking it's good to use like previous years as reference points, sure, but you're in new regulation sets. You've got new things to play with. Don't rely too much on past year's performance. It's different.
These cars are so fundamentally different. The way they generate their downforce, the way they use their suspension, the way they deploy their power is so radically different from the last set of regulations that it was a bit of an odd one for Charles sort of to flick back through his copybook and choose last year's sort of setup as a base point to work from. All in though, for me, it was good firefighting from Lewis with continued solid communication. But I think Shah is now starting to feel the pressure to perform and needs to find more from this car, which is possibly why he went to an older setup, one that he's familiar with and hoped would give him the feel he wanted back to the car, but not
I mean,
something
the
that really
positive was he
worked for him.
finished and he
Yeah,
got points, which is more than anybody said for the last two races.
he made it to the end and points on the board, but I mean, it's what, 4 points for P8? It's not a huge amount when your
Yeah,
teammate is,
he's level on points now with Norris, which considering Norris didn't start the Chinese Grand Prix,
yeah, and has
is
had good maths in there as well.
yeesh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a great look. But yeah, I think it's that there's more going on behind the scenes with Ferrari, and I think it's really interesting to see how that's going to sort of level out the playing field as it moves forwards. Technically, Norris sits ahead of Leclerc as well, despite
Hmm.
the fact they're tied on
Which
points.
is mad because again, DNS
Yeah,
alone, never mind anything else.
yeah, it's a crackers one, but there we go. Should we move to McLaren then, if we're already mentioning Norris?
We may as well.
Piastri qualifies seventh, finishes fourth. Norris qualifies sixth, finishes seventh.
Yashu would be very happy with that. He, as I mentioned just now, got to a point where he was ahead of Lewis, but then he kind of fell off a cliff towards the end, couldn't get anywhere near Antonio challenge for the podium. But I don't think that McLaren or either of the drivers in any way, shape, form, or combination are going to be challenging for victories or podiums on merit. The current rate of things this year, they are the biggest losers from this new regulation set so far in terms of from where they were last year to where they are this year. Um, they're going to be in and around and quite annoying for people. Kimi Antonelli being the prime example this weekend, you had that great moment early on in the race where it looked like they were both going to mug him going into turn six of all places, one on either side of him, and you go, we're about to witness either an ungodly move of brilliance and racecraft between these three drivers, or we're about to see a massive shunt. And then neither happened in the end, and the two McLaren drivers kind of realised, yeah, that's not going to work. We'll just back off and fall in behind. Um, that's probably the closest they've actively got to racing Mercedes this year, though. And the fact that it was with Antonelli was amusing because you think, hey, championship leader. Then you look at the position to go, oh, never mind. It's not even for a podium at that point in the race, and it's only lap, what, six or whatever it was. So they're in a really interesting no man's land where Red Bull maybe they'll threaten them a bit towards the end of the season if they continue on their trajectory. But with Lewis being Lewis, and you've got to think that Charles gonna bounce back from his recent run of bad luck. Ferrari shouldn't be having too much of a worry about McLaren behind them. They're just going to be in this interesting no man's land behind the top two and ahead of Red Bull, just trying to keep hold of it and go, yeah, this is maybe one of those learning years and a hell of a crash down back to earth for Norris and proof again. I think of what we were saying last year. If he didn't win the championship last year, he may not win it ever because that was the best opportunity he's gotten in his career up to that point.
Hmm.
And if this is where they're having to build from, and you take into account that the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull aren't just going to stop developing, they've got their work cut out.
Yeah, it's a big ask from McLaren at the moment as well. And equally, when you look at how tight and jumbled that mid pack is, the important thing to note
Mm,
is that that has jumped Piastri from sixth to fourth. Like we're still at a point in the season where the top end of the field, one really solid result can really move you around quite a lot.
mm.
And we've seen what Piastri does when he has that advantage over his teammate. He just locks in and puts the pressure on and keeps things driving weekend after weekend. And I think it was actually a really solid race from Piastri with all that in respect. He was able to sort of keep the car alive under him, keep the heat in the sort of, or the heat, the right amount of heat in his tires and in his brakes, and make things work for him. And he got involved, hustled those around him, never made it easy. And equally, it was never going to be easy with a car that's going through a big upgrade phase to get the week to week consistency you expect every time you get in the car at the start of a weekend. it feels different. There's new bits coming to it. There's this that's been changed. There's this that's been changed. It's a lot to put up with, but he seems to just be absorbing it at the moment a lot better than Norris is. And Norris is feeling quite sort of jumbled up by it. I don't know whether it's the pressure because he's the reigning champion to try and compete and the car isn't under him, so he's overdriving it in certain circumstances. There's a lot to unpack with what's going on at McLaren. I think when we get to sort of the summer break, they're going to be one of the really interesting ones to properly dive into because while it's easy to sort of praise Mercedes and say, look at Ferrari actually doing well and having a competitive season and challenging people, Red Bull always a bit ropey for them. McLaren are the reigning champions in this, back to back at the moment, constructors champions, with the drivers' champions still in the team and a very solid second driver there. And they're being blown out of the water by everyone around them, and at times being made to look like fools by the Red Bull junior team.
And it kind of, in a way, especially if it continues, reaffirms maybe some of the other things we were saying last year of if this is how close, let's say, Lando and McLaren can get to losing a drivers' championship, and how close, and indeed he did in the case of Oscar, when they have such a powerful car with them that can do so many things, if that's what they're like in their peak performance, then perhaps it isn't that surprising that when they don't have that, this is where they're at.
Mm. Yeah, when they're at their absolute best, it's still touch and go as to whether they're going to do it. So as soon as they start to falter, we're currently in
Don't be,
third
it's not
place.
actually that surprising.
Yeah, we're currently in third place. Is it going to be that surprising if things start to turn around? I mean, what's their points gulf at the moment to Red Bull? McLaren are on 159, Red Bull are 115. It's not improbable, especially considering the fact that Hadjar is now consistently sort of in the points, banging in the results. He's only just behind Verstappen in the driver's standings. There's a bit of a points gulf, but he's
And if you're
there.
going to bet on any of those three out of Norris, Piastri, and Verstappen winning a race this year, you'd still put the money on Verstappen, which is
Yeah,
mad when you think about Oscar's consistency and ability. The fact that Lando is a world champion now, but it's Max. He doesn't need the best car to do it. You know, he
yeah,
can pull out some of the performances like he did this weekend, like he did earlier in the season. And as you saw in Japan last year as another prime example, you know, he just does it on occasion, and you go, "Oh,
yeah. Sure. He just sort of comes away with things, and you sort of just left looking at him going, okay, I guess you can do that, I suppose. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a bit of a points golf, 73 points for Verstappen, 42 for Hadjar. So what's that? That's 31 points. But I mean, Hadjar's getting in there. He's getting in the points. We might as well talk about Red Bull. They're next on the list. Verstappen qualifies fifth after dropping it in qualifying at a very strange point. He'd felt the back end
it's kind
going
of very
flat.
amusing that he crashes out and still qualifies fifth." So obviously,
Yes.
at the first lap time, was still good enough to be halfway up the field. Like, it's just Verstappen being Verstappen there. Of
Yeah,
course, he managed that somehow.
you can't keep a Verstappen down. But yeah, qualifies fifth, finishes second. Brilliant opening stint to his race. Absolutely puts the pressure on when he knows he's got the fresh tyres, but when he knows that everyone else is eventually going to get hot and run out of electricity, get those moves in, get that position early, and hold it. Hadjar, meanwhile, qualifies eighth, makes his way up to sixth, has a fairly solid little race there, putting in the hard graft, putting in the miles, and making it work.
Yeah, I mean, this is a result for Herschel where he's not benefiting off a DNF ahead of him or a penalty. This is pace. He got past Norris, he got past Leclerc, and he got that on proper merit, which was really nice to see. Verstappen, like you say, he's kind of maximizing his potential during the race there. He knows when it's going to be good, he knows when it's going to be tricky, but he knows which order to do stuff in to figure out what he can then get away with later on. Um, it was a slight strategy fumble, I think, from him well, not by him necessarily, but by Red Bull when they took the pressure off Russell. But at the same time, you think that yeah, you maybe weren't on for the win anyway. Russell looked a little bit like Hamilton did in Spain, going, "I'm going to win this one way or the other, so it doesn't matter if you get past me or not. I'll come back at some point." Um, so I can't really complain too much. It just reminded me a little bit of what not Mercedes, what Ferrari did with Charles in Australia. Um, they kind of pulled the pin first, then Russell was just able to gap him, and he looked comfortable from there on out. And now it was just Red Bull doing that. Um, so possibly, maybe not on paper. I need to check the results from earlier on, but I'd say arguably from the performance and the potential that they showed their best, probably combined weekend of the season so far. I'd say it's what it felt like.
What for Red Bull?
Yes.
Let's see. Australia combined 8 points. China a total of
Not just
just
even in points, just in overall execution on
oh
all areas.
overall
You know,
execution in
they
all
both had
areas.
obviously two top six finishes, improved from the qualifying positions. The strategy was mostly bulletproof. The racecraft was good. We got to see Max go against Lewis. I did find it funny when Max complained on the radio because, you know, if he'd done that to Lewis, it would have been perfectly fine for
Yeah,
him to have done that and gotten away with it. And you saw that after the race. I don't know if you saw actually, but Lewis congratulated him on a good race, and they're all smiling and hugging, and it's all fine again. It's just obviously them in the moment, being who they are, and everyone going, "Ah, can we have 2021 again, but in red and blue this time instead of black and blue?"
yeah. I mean, they were knocking each other black and blue last time round, but it's nice seeing them sort of doing it again, knowing how to race each other and really enjoying it. I agree with you on the fact this was, as a team, as two drivers in
Hmm.
a supporting team, probably one of their finest weekends of the year so far. It was really good to see them all up there working at this really strong level, communicating, pulling off the pit stops, pulling off the strategies, and yeah, turning around some relatively ropey sort of qualifying positions to produce some really solid results. The car is also still a long way off of being capable as either driver would like. We know what Max can extract from a car, but they're both getting a lot from it as well, I think is the really impressive part here. Max's run through the field was astonishing, and his battle with Lewis, as you said, was stellar. So if we get to see more of that as the season develops and it maybe gives us a Max Verstappen race win, I'm not going to be mad.
No, not at all. You know, between that and the McLarens trying to take on Antonelli, you had this lovely sort of opening phase of the Grand Prix where you were thinking, oh yeah, that was Formula One. That's what we need a bit more of that every now and again. If you look at the Spanish Grand Prix and go, as a result, the sport needed that, then as the racecraft, you go, this is what we need to have a bit more of to showcase to the people that are not as convinced by this regulation set that it can be a good bit of fun still. And that there is potential for this style of racing. It's just we need a few of the other teams to catch up a little bit more. You also have the fact that Austria, and I think this is the interesting thing. It's a track where you can overtake and you can have these battles. But one of the reasons it worked better this year than it has for the last few years in particular, I think, is because the cars are smaller, they're lighter, they're more nimble. You look at Formula 2 and Formula 3 this weekend, just the perfect example of that. Hopefully you're caught up on it, but you saw some tremendous fights throughout the field there. You had a seven-way fight for third in Formula 2, I think, at one point, and you had just all over the place, just cars just beating the living daylights out of each other, and somehow most of the time all making it work and overtaking in areas of the track where you didn't think it was doable. And then you got a bit of that in Formula One, and you saw that with Lewis twice, once with Charles and once with Max. I think it was on the outside of turn six, I think it was going into seven, and you go, oh, that's not gonna. Oh no, okay, he's made it. Don't do that to me again. And then he does it again about 5 minutes later. You go, stop risking it. Stop. It's not worth it. Don't. It's not worth the blood medicine I need for this to calm myself down. It was nice to have that, and again, for it to be Max and Lewis after all this time is good. It's good.
It's, I think, yeah, the smaller cars, certainly when we get to the older circuits, because bear in mind the Red Bull Ring, while it's only been Red Bull Ring since fairly recently, it has been the A1 ring before this point. It's been around for a little while. It's a small, narrow, twisty, tight little circuit. And when we go to something like Hungary, fairly soon on the calendar,
Hmm.
which is known as being Monaco without the walls, we're going to see some interesting racing
I'm
there.
looking at like turn 4, 5 sort of places going. Some people are going to risk it there, and it's not going to go well. But oh, I'm so glad they're going to try it.
Because last year's cars used to be able to go sort of side by side through turn one, then a bit through turn two, and just about try and hang it around the outside of three. But now we're smaller. We could see that run go all the way back up the hill again.
That chicane's going to be interesting. We've seen some interesting overtakes in Formula 3 there before, and they're obviously not as small as that, but going to be worth contemplating if you're one of the drivers getting a bit close up ahead and going, oh, I've had enough of this now. Let me try something.
If you're in 12th or 11th and you're making a big send on the brakes into that chicane, it's going to be good. I mean, trying to think of other circuits where again it gets a bit narrow. Mexico as well. We've seen cars starting to go
I was
sort of
thinking
side by
even
side through
Spa,
there.
the middle section of Spa, there's elements there where you go, oh, I might as well give it a little bit of a go. That might work there. There's just enough space for it to work.
I think this year we're going to see some interesting moves round the outside at P1 or something at Spa, and it's going to be phenomenal. But anyway, Red Bull out the way. Alpine next. Not a strong weekend from them. Gasly qualifies 11th, finishes 13th, while Colapinto qualifies 16th and finishes 15th.
Yeah, it's weird to say this, but uncharacteristically bad weekend from Alpine. How times change. Gasly had a lot of pace towards the end, but just could do nothing with it. He was stuck with the Ferraris and McLarens that were lapping him, and so he desperately wanted to get past them, but couldn't because he had to keep getting in the way of them because they also had just enough pace to keep him behind, and so he was stuck in this never-ending loop. It felt like, and Colapinto just anonymous all weekend. Really, he sort of reverted back to the Colapinto that we are more familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, given that Gasly tumbled backwards 2 places, the fact that Colapinto moved forward one is not the worst weekend from Colapinto. But again, given that for some reason the car just wasn't under either of them this weekend, who knows? Maybe also maybe Colapinto's dented performances are fuel to the fire that maybe Alonso's moving back to Alpine now that Flav's back there and Flav's his old manager, and obviously Flav wants him to do it because he gets 20% of whatever Alonso makes. Um, who
He
knows?
wants
Maybe
more Gucci money.
yeah, maybe Alonso wants that Gucci money. Who knows? Alonso Gasly as a team pairing, though, is not one I ever thought we'd see happen.
I didn't think I'd ever see Fernando Alonso in a Gucci race suit either, but that's the kind of reality we tend to have to contend with.
That baby of his
Mm.
is going to be ripped out. But yeah, clearly not a circuit that favors the Alpine either. Possibly some adjustments that need dialing in better too. They've been sort of bringing a few little upgrades, alternatives, and tweaks as the race goes by. Interesting note though, they still haven't had any notable reliability issues that have plagued a
Mm.
lot of the other Mercedes power unit customers and even the main team, especially with the heat this weekend. I think they've got a really solid cooling package on their car, and it seems to very much work to their benefit. It's not overstressing that engine, the battery pack, the gearbox. With Silverstone next, it's set to be a warm one this weekend. I reckon they'll be back on it with a conventional circuit and a good setup.
I'm just sniggering to myself, knowing exactly which circuit they'll suddenly have an issue at, which I'm sure you can guess. Look at
Vegas.
history.
What Alpine seems to have had problems all Brazil, Mexico.
You're thinking too hard about this. They'll have issues in Singapore.
Oh, oh. As long as it's just sort of oh no, even then, just sort of oh no, my engine's gone pop right here. Where's
How
Gasly?
is Fernando in first?
Yeah, not even Fernando. Can you imagine? Can
Damn,
you
wrong
imagine?
team.
Can you imagine Gasly having to do a crash gate for Colapinto to win a race?
I think I'd leave the team at that point.
Oh, that'd be like their way of sweetening the deal with him so he can leave so Alonso can come back.
Oh, move on, move on.
Move on. Racing Bulls. Lawson qualifies ninth, finishes ninth. Lindblad qualifies 10th, finishes 10th. Yeah, enough said, really.
Question for you, which is mean, I know. It was the third double points finish in a row for the team. When was the last time that happened?
Oh, would it have been 2020 when it was Kvyat and Gasly?
No, and I say this because it's a bit of a trick question. It's never happened before in the history
What?
of the team. They've had the last time they had back-to-back double points finishes prior to this season was 2015, Singapore and Japan. But they are just such a weirdly inconsistent team that they will have maybe some stellar performances across the season, but they won't be back to back at any point. There were a couple of close calls where you'd have double points, then one car would score, but the other one wouldn't, and then they'd get double points. But very rarely double points, and never have they had a triple go of things in Formula One. They are to quote Liam Lawson and to emulate him, they're on fire at the moment. And he had one of the best quotes, I think, of the whole season by coming back on the radio a second time and going, I'm still on fire, which I just thought in isolation is perfect because imagine turning on the TV at that point and going, oh shit, what's happened here? And then he's just perfectly fine overtaking people, and it clearly wasn't too bad of a fire.
Yeah, I mean, considering the Cadillacs had caught fire, it was quite a bold statement for him to go with, I'm on
Mm.
fire. I was like, do you mean that as in like you're making some wicked overtakes here, my guy? Or is this sort of like a case of like the ethanol flames in IndyCar? We can't see that you're on
Yeah, we
fire
can't see
because the
them.
fuel's vaporizing. Um, but yeah, both drivers absolutely hammering their way through this season with just relentless capability. The chassis, if a little uninspiring, is clearly easy to extract a lot from, and we're seeing it building a lot of confidence in both drivers. Lawson's really built himself back up coming into this season, which has been really nice to see.
Mm.
And I might not have seen it, but his moves coming out of the pits, they weren't shown on the main feed. I went
Yeah,
back
I
and
saw.
yeah, was incredible. Well, Lindblad and Haas mug him off as he brings his tyres into temperature going into turn three. He then just slingshots past both of them down sort of four into five. And it was phenomenal just using that wide line, getting the power down, really solid racing from him. And again, it's that
Can't
sort of thing
remember
if you
who it
go,
was. We saw someone do this in Formula 2 or Formula 3. They essentially went, by all means, go ahead, and then mug them both off immediately at the exact same part of the track. And I just thought, Liam's been watching the feeder series this morning. And if I get the opportunity, I'm doing that. And sure enough, it's what he did.
it wasn't John Bennett, was it?
No, no, don't worry.
Okay.
That would have been too much.
But yeah, really interesting stuff from Racing Bulls. It's nice to see that the team is sort of behind the drivers. The drivers have got the car underneath them. And again, we're sort of in record-setting te territory for this team.
Hmm.
Where will they go next? It's exciting times, especially with Lindblad
There's
coming in his home
a
race.
13-point gap to Alpine, and you've got to think they've got the stronger lineup on paper. They're much more consistent. And if you were going to say which team is more likely to get a podium, okay, I know we've already kind of had one with Gasly this year, but that was Monaco being Monaco, which we see a lot of the time. I could somehow see Racing Bulls doing it on sort of merit in the way that Lawson nearly did in Baku last year. You know, he was very qualified ridiculously high up and then still finished fifth. He wasn't a million miles away. And if we've got cars that can overtake somewhere, like in Baku now, we might be on for something.
I could see both drivers somehow wingling their way onto a podium just by hook or by crook, and that's going to be really exciting. I especially like the fact that we've got Lindblad in a really positive place at the moment, coming into his home Grand Prix with a chassis he understands and a chassis that also seems to like whatever weather conditions and temperatures you throw at it. So
You could see
it's
like a Mick Schumacher versus Max Verstappen Silverstone sort of thing and go, how the hell did this happen? And
yeah,
I don't know who we put him up against in this instance. Maybe Max Verstappen, but it would be quite fun to see that going. I don't know how
the
we made this happen, but I'm up for it.
Lindblad on Antonelli violence.
I'm here for it.
I think it'd be really exciting to see. Anyway, with that out of the way, Haas, we've both got maybe a sentence for each of them here. Behrman qualifies 13th, finishes 14th. Qualifies 15th, finishes 16th, both slipping back.
Just a non-event weekend for the entire team. I really don't know what to say about them other than my dreaded famous phrase from Kick Salisbury a couple of years ago. I still like their livery because it really is a very nice livery. I don't have anything else to say. And the only thing I go back to is the repeated talk of Ocon leaving, and I just think that's not the problem. Your problem's the car.
Mm.
Quote Christian Horner.
Change
Fix
the
it.
bloody car.
You know. I don't see what say if you threw signs into that seat. I don't see what he could do that would markedly improve it to the point that you go, oh, it was Ocon all along. Like, you need to develop the car a bit more. There's something not quite working with it, and it's gone back to what we've seen in the past. That at least the past two regulation sets have very strong. 5 races later, never mind. Try
Yeah.
again next regulation set.
Next regulation set 5 years later. Yeah, it's I don't know, they can't cling on to it. They can't find the pace. They can't I don't know what's gone wrong with the way they set up their cars, whether it's their development work, whether because it's not even like we're getting to the point where their development team, because bear in mind, they've got Jack Doohan on the sim rig for them.
Mm.
He's not a bad driver, and equally these are circuits that he knows. So
And he's not the only one in their books either that's doing the
no.
stuff for them. So it's, you got multiple drivers, varying experiences. They're all experienced,
Mm,
alongside capable drivers in the cars themselves.
mm.
And yet, it's not going well for you. But admittedly, it could be worse, as we're about to get to. But you started off so strong.
Yeah,
Stop doing this to us, Haas. Be consistently good.
yeah. They they too
We
much
want you to
demands
do
too soon.
well.
Yeah,
You're winning the America battle at the moment. You're beating Cadillac. Come on, make it convincing.
not hard to beat Cadillac at the moment.
Don't focus on that.
We'll get to Cadillac in due course. First, though, we've got Williams, Audi, and Aston Martin to get through. So, Williams, Sainz qualifies 17th and DNFs with a fantastic sounding engine retirement. Albon qualifies 18th and finishes 17th.
I think he was the one with the upgrades this weekend, which is awkward.
Mm.
Um, hmm, Which essentially just put him above the teammate that DNF. Uh, he's also signed his first DNF of the season, I think. So, hmm, good in that respect, but bad that it happened eventually, I suppose. Again, a bit like Ash, just what do you really say? Not much of anything. They just were there, and it's really disappointing to see because we say this most weekends at the moment. You really want them to do well. They have such good potential as a driver pairing. We know that they are capable. Last year was proof of that. It's quite amusing that they said they sacrificed last year for this year and then had an absolutely barnstormer of a year as they did last year. Um, and then this is what the payoffs were. And again, going back to an interview Alex Albon did recently, he was saying we were too ambitious with this year's car, but we know where all the issues are. And either he's just flat out lying, which I can't really see because he doesn't seem capable in a lot of ways. He's too nice for it. Um, or it's somehow more difficult for them to solve the problems than what they realize. It's a case of we know what the problems are, just have no idea what to do about them. Um, my advice would be to go and talk to, I think it's Van Amersfoort Racing in Formula 3, where their Japanese driver Yamakoshi, I think, I don't know if you saw this, got disqualified from the sprint race on Saturday for being 3 kilograms underweight for the car, which
This,
was quite impressive. And I'm beginning to wonder what did you forget to add on the car because that's not a small amount of weight in F1 or F3 terms.
mm,
So maybe they need to go and have a talk with them and go, oh yeah, we just took all of this out, and it turns out the car goes a lot quicker. You'll get disqualified, but at least you'll be able to have the weight problem solved.
yeah. Was he the same one that was disqualified from a race in Formula in the Monaco round, or am I thinking of a different driver?
That's asking too much of me.
I'll go and check the notes back later. But yeah, it's expensive sounding engine retirement for science. Something in that Mercedes package is very setup sensitive, I think is the way to phrase it. It relies on clearly a lot of parameters being very correct, and Mercedes has been very coy about what that power unit requires this season. So I think there's been some problems creeping in for a lot of the customer teams. Alpine have just lucked into figuring out exactly what it needs, or Flavio Briatore has been Flavio Briatore in that manner.
I think he got pole taken from him in Spain. I think that's what you're thinking of,
Um,
Yamakoshi.
Monaco F3 um, DSQ. I'm sure there was a DSQ. No, here we go. Hiyu Yamakoshi
It
disqualified
was
from Monte
Monaco.
Carlo
Okay.
sprint race. Yeah. It was post-race checks. I can't remember quite what was. It was um the push rods were the wrong way, mounted the wrong way
Oh
around.
yes,
They're mounted left and
yeah,
right
he's
and
having
right
some
right.
very odd times at the moment, but
Yeah.
there we go.
But there we go.
Maybe don't talk to them in the end.
Yeah. Or
We
just
just
don't.
have different problems.
Yeah, yeah, VA. Don't go and speak to VAR about their setups at the moment. Very weird. But yeah,
Uh-oh.
I wonder with Williams if they've developed themselves down the wrong route. If they started development too early before they actually were able to test the car and do anything, they've sort of
Got a
already.
Mercedes 2022 situation of
Yeah,
we're committed now and we've got to see it through regardless of what happens here.
yeah, they started. They were one of the first teams to start development on this generation of regulations, and I think the problem they've worked into is the fact that they can't back out of it now. They're already sort of like way too far down that road, and it's too expensive and too time consuming to go backwards. I don't. They've got the development team there to help them sort of undo it. So they're going to need to change some big bits of the car's sort of fundamentals to get it right, and that's a lot to ask.
Yeah, it's I hope it changes, but I'm just not sure how at the moment. It's not
Yeah.
good.
We will see how, if, and when it changes. In the meantime, Audi. qualified 14th for Hulkenberg, finished 12th, while Bortoleto qualified 12th and finished 11th.
Kind of where you want to be if you're Audi, I suppose, because we do say a lot of the time that if you're on the fringes of the points, even if you then come away with nothing ultimately, you're in perfect position to capitalize should something go wrong with the cars up ahead of you. Which at this point for Audi is sort of the territory that they need to be capitalizing on and making the most of, because until they sort out their development, that's sort of the best they can hope for.
Mm. Yeah, it's I like the fact that we're seeing them on the fringes of the points and they're hot on the heels of the rest of the field, especially with
Again, you
Haas.
think back 2 years to what that team looked like, and they were
Mm.
just scoring points in Qatar once.
Yeah,
To we're on the fringes of the points. It looks better when you look at it like that. It's
mm.
just painful because you know again these two drivers that are very capable.
Yeah, that's where it is, and I'm sh really good work from both the drivers this weekend to keep the cars in that competitive part of the field running up there. And I know they'll be disappointed they don't have anything to show for it, but the whole team, the whole unit is moving in the right direction. I think it's a matter of time. There'll be the upgrade that clicks, and they will leap forward. And the problem is that's going to come at the cost of what the Racing Bulls, maybe Williams, yeah, Haas,
We can sacrifice Haas and Williams.
but Haas aren't finishing in those positions. It's who's finishing sort of eighth, ninth, tenth at the moment.
I was going for constructors because I just figured that Racing Bulls would just make it up
Oh,
in enough places, so then it doesn't matter if they don't get it as much.
yeah, but yeah, Racing Bulls have knocked up enough points as it is. But is Alpine going to slide back enough that it doesn't threaten sort of Racing Bulls? It's going to
Put
be
it
really
like
interesting
this:
watching this midfield
I
battle.
think if you take those three teams of Alpine, Racing Bulls, and Audi, I would argue that Alpine has the weakest lineup of the three. So if there was one of those that had to slip back outside of the points, or an opportunity where you could at least get one of the Audis into the points, it
Mm.
would be at the expense of an Alpine. Um, because it's just more likely that both Racing Bulls will get there than it is both Alpines.
Yeah, I think that's a fair sort of summation of it. Then when it comes to Aston Martin, Alonso qualifies 21st, finishes 18th. Stroll qualifies 22nd, and DNFs.
I'm not sure if it happened or not, but this could be history in a different way because they talked about it, but I don't know if it then happened. But Fernando Alonso was at risk late on in the race of getting lapped by Albon, who was in P17, one place ahead of him on track. Such was the disadvantage uh, that Aston Martin have at the moment. And obviously, we're used to first place and even second, third, and fourth place lapping many a car. But to see 17th place or 18th place on the grid, that's one for the history books to go back and go, I don't know if we've even kept records of such a thing happening to find out if we can tell if this has happened previously or not, or if we just start here and go, please don't let there be any more entries like this in the future because holy heck, that's not good.
Yeah, it's how badly do you have to be doing such that the guy only a place ahead of you and still at the back of the field is now about to lap you? It there is going to be a way of figuring out how many seconds off the pace you are a lap for to figure that out
That's
because
how far off the pace you are for 17th. How far
yeah,
off the pace are you for first?
yeah, it's that's big. We could probably find it actually, do the maths on it. Let's see, FIA documents. Where's my FIA documents account? Here we go. Austrian Grand Prix official documents, final race classification. Here we go. Just chuck it on my desktop, save it, open it. So, um, uh, oh, they don't even have the full data for it. It just says 3 laps. Um,
Was that
so
by Albon or was that by Russell?
No, so that's Aston Alonso is 3 laps down to George Russell. If we assume that his fastest lap was a 1 minute 12 .501, which puts him nearly 2 seconds a lap slower than George Russell, you could very quickly do the maths to figure out exactly at what point, if we had like another 2 laps or so, whether Albon would have been able to lap him.
It's
Because
not good that I think the fact that we're having a conversation to begin with is proof that we need that it's just not that we need more proof that Aston Martin are in a bad spot, but if more proof were needed, here it is. They really need to. We talk about Williams having developed themselves into a corner. What the heck have Aston Martin done?
Well, let's put it this way. Albon's finish time was a 1 hour 27 minutes 6 seconds and 0.061 the thousandths of a second. Alonso was a 1 hour 26:42.812 because obviously he was a lap down. He therefore crossed the finish line ahead of Albon despite being nearly a lap off of him. So there was only maybe 18 seconds in it. So
Oh, is that all?
yeah, Albon was only 18 seconds away from
Lacked
lapping
the
Alonso.
advertisement that you, yeah. Yeah, not 18 seconds ahead, 18 seconds to getting back past you for a second time.
Yes.
Oh dear me.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Stroll just out there being Stroll and retiring. I can't remember what was given as his reason for retirement.
No, I can't remember either. I paid attention, but it's also a Stroll, so as soon as it was told, I probably forgot about it.
Yeah, very, very tricky to try and sort of log that one away. Might as well talk about Cadillac. Bottas qualifies 20th, Perez qualifies 19th, and then both cars DNF. That's the thing, the car has pace in it ahead of the Aston Martins. It's got 1 lap pace, it's got some level of drivability. That's about all the niceness I have to say about it. There's big brake issues in this car, and the fact that we've got Silverstone and Spa, some very fast tracks coming up, the drivers are going to need confidence on in the brakes going into those circuits. And we've seen Bottas have a big moment in Spain on that back straight, and we've seen both cars just obliterate their brakes this weekend.
Yeah, still rather here than next weekend or in Spa, like you say.
Yeah.
So if we're getting it done now, that's and not doing it later, that's positive. It's just a shame because I think the number of upgrades they brought with them this weekend. Obviously, we can't really then see what they could have done in race trim because we didn't get enough of the race for either of them to find out. I feel like I'm going to just give them a lot of leeway for the entirety of the year.
Just it's nice
Um,
to have them here.
yeah, and I think you know we rightly berate the likes of Haas, Williams, Aston Martin because they've been around a while. And I know
Mm.
I'm probably going to say this at least once a review episode, but Cadillac are learning as they go. They're brand new. They're going to be figuring out, and it's a team that yes has history in motorsport and automation, but it's not like Prima when they went to IndyCar, going, well, we know how single seaters work. It's different single seaters to what we used to, but we know the theory. We know how to succeed. And then they just absolutely had one of the worst cars that I've seen in quite a while, which was again one of my favorite things of reasons that you got to retire is when Robert Schwartzman's car tried to kill him in the second race of the season because his seat was melting, I think. Of all the things to come and get you, at least they're having car proper problems with brakes. And you go, okay, that's understandable because I don't know what you do to get the seat to not try and kill you. You know, that's a whole other kettle of fish. They don't have that. They don't have Premier IndyCar issues, which is, I admit, I'm having to reach into the bag quite deep and find some silver linings for them. But I'm glad I can at least find them. Whereas for Aston Martin, I don't have any of those. You get nearly getting lapped by Albon. At least have the decency to retire early with brake problems like Cadillac.
It's yeah.
I just really like that livery as well, to be honest. It's just a really cool livery.
I have more positive things to say about Cadillac than I do Aston Martin. It's just annoying that we get to Aston Martin first by proxy of 1 point.
Yes, especially
It
when it was at the expense of Cadillac. It
Cadillac,
was
yeah,
kind of, you just look at Sergio Perez and go, you did this.
yeah,
You put us in this situation. Damn
yeah.
you.
It would be nice to be able to sort of get to Cadillac and go, you're still trying, well done, and then Aston Martin and go, well, you're a true spinner once again. So that brings us nicely into winners and spinners. Your winner, please.
It's just happened. Can't be anyone else for me. I think he just, no, again, I always say this, despite the fact that they always have the right to be there. He had no right being there, and yet he made it work. It's Max Verstappen doing Max Verstappen things.
Found the gap, made it work, found the pace in his car and made it work for him. Yeah, for me though, George
And a
Russell,
bit of sass on top.
yeah, can't go wrong with a bit of sass. For me, George Russell, stellar qualifying, knows the rule book, knows how to play a Grand Prix, and then when it came to it, just sort of commanded the race, pulled the trigger when he needed to, held out when he needed to. Really, really good time for him to start turning things around, especially coming into his home Grand Prix, getting his foot back in the door, showing what he's made of, and just at the right time. I don't want to over egg
He
things because
needed it.
we're going to be recording our preview for the British Grand Prix tomorrow because we're otherwise
Both
unavailable for the rest of the
both the
week.
division.
Um, we'll discuss that in the preview. So yeah, for me, winner Russell. Spinner,
Ferrari. They should know better. They
they
came off a season high and they came in and we talked a lot of this episode about teams and drivers boxing themselves into situations, and it felt like they boxed themselves in a little bit by going, we only have one way this can work, and it's not even a sense of let's try something different with at least one of the cars. It was just damage limitation. You go, do you not have anything for this? All right.
yeah. I'm a little more positive towards Ferrari, maybe because I'm a big Ferrari fan. I'm not
Say
gonna
like I'm not.
I'm not gonna decree them a spinner. For me, it's Aston Martin. It's the fact that we still haven't seen any like notable upgrades. You're getting lapped by the guy one position ahead of you. It's an abysmal result. Um, I genuinely don't know why they keep turning up every weekend if they're this uncompetitive. I know that we always say you've got to be in it to win it, but they're not even in it, really.
Silver lining is you talk of abysmal results. That does give you a nice segue.
It does, which is our predictions, annoyingly, where neither of us scored points for pole position. You got a point for predicting a George Russell win. You got a point for an Antonelli third place. No one got points for the fastest lap. No one got points for wild predictions, which means that we're now tied on points for this season's predictions game.
Which makes you very happy, I can tell,
No, it doesn't.
considering you had quite a lead compared to me at the start of the season and for most of it up to that point.
I had worked up a very solid lead coming into Monaco. I was on no coming into Monaco. I was on 4 points. Eh? Oh no, that still has Imola written on it. That list. Eh? Have I not changed some of these bits?
It appear
Either
not.
way, I had a very strong points haul coming into this.
So I think I had nil
You were on
for
nil coming into
majority.
you. No, you got a point predict. You got a correct prediction in Japan. Credit where it's due.
Hmm.
You got one Aston Martin makes it to the end,
Hey, see silver linings.
which is still a bold prediction. What I think we're going to have to work that up to one Aston Martin finishes on the lead lap.
God, I'm not that ballsy yet. Maybe for Vegas.
Um, but yeah, I quickly shot into an early lead. And then you've
Who
just
do you think you
somehow
are? Piastri from last year.
yeah. Monaco, you no, you scored a point in Japan, did nothing until Monaco. Then in Spain, you scored 2 points, and then you scored another 2 points this weekend to tie with me. So get knotted. Meanwhile,
Says the guy who had the advantage and lost it, for sure.
yeah. Meanwhile, over in Fantasy Formula One, the highest scoring team this week was Chiara Martin's Blink 182 kilometers an hour. 218 points, very nicely done. Meanwhile, Stars Around the World by Maka, 210 points. And then Niklas Tadros Usart, 207 points with Tiklias F1. Yeah, Kara Martin, another really strong set of entries from her, actually. She's in fourth and fifth this weekend with some 41 seconds behind an on melancholy grid. So just really solid performance from her. Well done. The next one from either of us as we work our way down the list, Thiemo on the curbs, 165 points in 13th. Then I'm tied with myself this weekend in 17th. Pork
Oof,
Scratchings
rough week
Racing.
for you.
Yeah, Pork Scratchings Racing and Malteser Racing. Then I'm up here again in 20th with Jaffa Cake Racing. Then it's Champagne Macarons 2, my podcast team in 23rd, your podcast team in 26th, the British contingent in 28th, and then scoring a wholesome minus
I'm
51
surprised the
points.
British contingent's that low down. British drivers, well, mostly aside from them, they were all in the top 10.
What went wrong for you this weekend? You had Cadillac and Williams, though, as your constructors.
Yeah, that would explain it.
So while
No.
Lewis Hamilton on the double and George Russell not on the double did quite nicely, Albon only scored you 7 points, Behrman only scored you a point, and Lindblad scored you six. But then you lost 35 points with Cadillac and 6 points with
Oof.
Williams, giving a total of 62 this weekend.
The
Um,
only thing I've been grateful for is that there are many teams I can count as being British due to them being based in the UK, so I can work around that accordingly.
Yes. However, you did better than the worst of all possible options. This was the last week I left Kimi Antonelli in the team. They scored a total of minus 51, with Lance Stroll on the double for minus 34 points, Lindblad 6, Bortoletto 5, Sergio Perez minus 17, Antonelli 35, Aston Martin minus 11, Cadillac minus
Well,
35.
but Stroll essentially cancelled Antonelli out there.
Yes, yeah, I have actually, you'll be pleased to know, been in today. I remembered I've been in and updated the worst of all possible options. So I used all
Who
of
did
our free
you place
transfers.
Kimi with then?
So that team is now lined up as constructors. We have Aston Martin and Cadillac,
Fair. It's gonna be
and
quite
then
cheap. How much money do we have left over?
we have $61.5 million left over. Bear in mind that our other two
Where would
teams
you get
on
100?
Yeah, our other two teams on the podcast account have about 3 million left over. This has got
Yeah,
61.5.
yeah.
And then drivers wise, we have Stroll and Alonso, Perez and Bottas, and then simply because he was also very cheap and in the game is scoring very few points, Nico Hulkenberg. If he turns it around, we may have to look at swapping him with someone else. But yeah, they are set to have an absolutely dire British Grand Prix and hopefully start eating out of our total points haul, where overall this season, Nicolas
I want
Tardos
that team
does
to
start.
finish in the minus points
Yeah,
by
I
the end
will
of the
get them
year.
into the minus at the moment. They are currently on 265 points, so we could do it fairly early
That's
on.
265 points too many.
Yeah, I reckon by how many races have we got to a summer break?
Three. It's doable.
Doable. What do we got? What did I say wrong? We're on 265, so we've got to score
Hmm.
threes into 26
And so
goes
you put double
47.
negative on.
Double negatives on Stroll.
We've got a chance.
Yeah, we've got to score essentially minus 80 points each weekend by and large to do that, which I think is possible.
Doable. Doable.
But anyway, overall, Nicolas Tardos, Ursat, Dashfall team, 1,844 points currently leads the standings. Sabonius Racing, also a non-mover in at second, with run by Sebastian Fritz and non-mover at number three. Fabian Ettes, Etty 13, 1,546 points. Some movers and shakers on the grid. I'm overtaken by Chiara Martin, whose Blink 182 kilometers an hour moves up to seventh, 1,404. 1,414 points. My Jaffa Cake Racing moves down to eighth. My podcast team is a non-mover in 10th, as is Malteser Racing in 11th. And then eventually I'll find a Thiemo one. Oh, not good for Champagne Macarons 2, 1,176 points. You drop down to 16th, though, overtaken by Stars Around the World by Macca. You've then got On the Curbs in 17th. The Huster Plan moves up this weekend to 19th. We find my third team, Pork Scratchings Racing, in 23rd. On the way back up, I finally got a lineup for him sorted. The British contingent drops to 25th. And as to be expected, 29th place, the worst of all possible options, 265 points.
Setting it all up for a comeback, much like my predictions game. That's clearly what this is all going to be for, I'm sure,
I
at
won't
some point.
I won't do the Parks and Recreation line there. But anyway, in conclusion, that's all we've got time for on this episode of the Undercut podcast. We'll be back incredibly soon with a preview of the next Grand Prix at Silverstone, where you and I will both be, I believe I'm correct in saying. But we'll talk about that more tomorrow on the preview. Until the next 24 hours, if people want more from you, Thiemo, where can you be found?
This week, I've got an interview out with Porsche Sprint North America Challenge driver Anna Cecchi, who's leading the championship over there. And I've got a feature on Racing Bulls over on Paddock Influence on the Cubs on Instagram for everything else.
Very nice. And in the meantime, if you want more from me, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok as at Jesse on Cars. And importantly, you can still find me watching. You can still find me if you read Classic Car Weekly. I'll remember all the words I need to say here. Read Classic Car Weekly, new issue out on Wednesday, and there is the Classic Car Weekly podcast, but that won't be recorded with me on it this week. So wait until I come back, or go listen to one of the older ones where I am on it. But that'll all be back to normal next week because we've got until then the British Grand Prix.